Yeah, so essentially it's a group of actors that are putting on Macbeth, and it's set in a man, and they were having like a lover's spat fight in the bedroom. Enthusiastically nodded my head like, yes, I want some cream, and so she put some cream in it. And she looked at me again, and I nodded my head. I come out to a guy with a white mask who are staring at me because I'm lady. 7 or 8 of us that are like following him as they have no back. Essentially runs down these stairs.
I don't have an intro, I don't have a segue, so let's just start talking about your trip to New York.
Yes, I have a lot of feelings. A lot of things happened.
A
lot happened.
I feel like
my life has been changed forever. The 4 of us who went on that trip all agree that our life it cannot be the same anymore. It has been changed.
In a good way.
Yeah. Oh yeah, great way.
Or a bad way.
Though I will say, actually, I already forget some stuff. My memory's terrible, and you know that thing they say about when you remember something, you remember it a little bit wrong each time?
Yeah, you rewrite it.
Yes, and I've replayed this many times in my head. It's only been, 2-3 days? And
yeah, like a couple days.
Yeah, I think it's completely different than the original.
You played it like 50 years worth in your mind, and it's totally wrong now.
Yeah, so I can't actually tell you if any of this is true.
That's crazy. If that's how it actually works, that'd be crazy. Let's give a little bit of background, because I'm not even in the know on the background. But
okay, yeah, no, I'll do that. First off, though, I just want to say, so we did a 3-day trip to New York. We specifically went to New York to do this thing called Sleep No More, which my friends had talked to me about. I was like skeptical. I didn't know what it was about. Also fairly expensive. And I'm not a big spender, so I was like a little timid about that. And I was like, I don't know if it's worth it. But I will say it was very much worth it, and I would pay a lot more for it because it was amazing. But so we essentially went into New York just for this.
You and your friends went to go see a show called Sleep No More, which is some sort of live production.
Yes. So do you know much on the background of it?
I've never heard of this before.
Okay. So essentially, it's an immersive, interactive play experience. So it's a group of people who are putting on the play Macbeth, and apparently there's also maybe some Rebecca in there or something. I don't know. That part's confusing. Which actually that will be... It's another
That's
play,
a Shakespeare
novel?
thing?
No, I don't think... It's not Shakespeare, I don't think. But the confusion aspect will be a theme among this whole entire telling of the story. But yeah, so essentially it's a group of actors that are putting on Macbeth, and it's set in like the 1930s, 1940s X time. So they have, like the old dapper clothing on, It's not like Shakespearean time. It's more current in that sense.
But it's like a little bit Victorian, a little bit Gothic.
Yeah, I guess I would say that because, yeah, there's definitely... I mean, their clothing was definitely 30s, 40s. They had music that was playing that was... 30s, 40s, but there was still some kind of like old, creepy, gothic-y nature, dark.
Because I feel like when I think of the 20s and 30s, I can think of 2 different types. Because there's like an old style, like maybe like a transatlantic old style, which is like more historic looking, and then there's like the 20s and 30s. It's like creepy 20s and 30s.
Oh,
like
it's definitely
the ambiance of there's like a dark, twisted.
Yeah, I would say
historic
that's
type.
Yeah, so it's set 1930s or so, and essentially it's the actors do not talk. It's really dancing. That's how the art is expressed. And when you go in,
can I stop you before you get too deep into the story?
Yeah. And
reveal how uncultured I am. Can you give me a brief rundown of what the story of Macbeth is?
Oh no! See, I hope you. I didn't want you to ask this. Okay, so
no.
I should also do another preface and say that I have never read Macbeth, and the only information I know about Macbeth is that there are some witches in it. That's literally the baseline of my knowledge.
So Macbeth is the one that starts with the witches.
Yeah. So, and I have to say, so I went in not knowing Macbeth at all, came out not knowing Macbeth at all.
Okay, so that's not a critical part of the story.
So yeah, I guess not, because I still had a enjoyable experience, and I didn't need that. I think it could help. So, for instance, spoiler alert, my friends and I want to do this again because we liked it so much. And I want to actually read Macbeth so I could know what's going on. Because the thing is, you're thrown into this with really no knowledge of anything. You're just kind of thrown in. They give you a mask. They tell you can't talk. You're like, that's literally all they give you. So you don't know any of the backstory, and they don't talk, so you still don't know anything. So you go in and you're like, who's this person? Who are they supposed to be? Who's this person? Who's that? And you can still kind of pick up some pieces and kind of follow along to some degree, but you're also just kind of still confused the entire time. But essentially, from what I've gathered about Macbeth since seeing it and then also reading some things, there's like the three witches. Macbeth is... They prophesize that he's going to be king, but he has to kill some people or something like that. So Macbeth goes around killing a lot of people, and then, spoiler, at the end, Macbeth, it dies. He's killed by someone or something like that. But there's, of course, other storylines going on, and this, like I said, it has that weird thing where it also aligns with Rebecca or some other storyline, and they kind of play up other things that aren't in Macbeth, but they kind of created. So
I'm guessing you don't know the plot to Rebecca either?
My friend told me, but I will admit that I don't remember. Something about a sister being jealous of another sister? No, a girl being jealous of an old girlfriend. No, a girl... No, I'm just going to say no.
Is this a Bible story? Like
no.
Biblical Rebecca?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
No, I think it's like a novel.
Okay.
But
what do I know?
It's unimportant because none of us could figure out how it actually related to the story anyway. Maybe that's just hearsay and rumor. But yeah, so essentially you go into the place and, well, actually I'll start with the beginning where we're outside and we wait in line. We came to this side road of New York there was no one there. It was kind of like an old, it seemed like I think it's an old warehouse-y building that they've renovated. Mm-hmm. So there's really like no marking. We walked by a door that was large and black and had some handles on it, and we thought, this must be it. And then you see a little tiny, tiny plaque on the side that says the McKittrick Hotel, I think that's what it's called. And so we thought that's where we're supposed to be. So we waited in line just for a little bit, and then you come into the building, and of course, like, it's mood lighting, so it's super, super dim, and you can't see anything. And you have to coat check, because they're like, oh, it's going to be really warm up there, you don't need a coat. And it was definitely warm up there. And also, you do a bit of running, so not good to have coats.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get to running later, but that definitely happens. So we coat checked, and then you go up to a person, you give them your name, which is really fancy. It's like you don't have a ticket, you just give them your name, and they find you, which is, I don't know. I just think that's kind of cool. You're like, oh, they're like, what's your last name? And I'm like, it's and they give you a playing card. And my friends and I all had an ace card. And you take your card and you walk up some steps, and then you go through this twisting hallway that is pitch black, no lights. It's super narrow, and it's like, you can just feel like it going down and then around a corner and then down and around, like you're just like zigzagging almost.
Interesting. Okay.
And you can't see anything, and it was creepy because my friends were in front of me and I was behind, so I was on the rear, and I was like, someone could be anywhere. I just don't, like, you can't tell. It was so dark. I'm not really sure what the purpose of that was. I don't know if that was to get you in the mood that you're being transported into another thing. Like, it definitely built the ambiance of it. Like, I was like, where are we going?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to
and interestingly,
change your perspective.
We left that way, and when we left, the bottom floor was lit up then. There were strips of light. Mm-hmm. And I don't know then, was it the case that before when we went, the lights were burned out and they hadn't turned them on or something? Or was it at the end, now you can have the lights on to go back to real world society or something?
Yeah, that's kind of cool. A cool way to make it feel like you're in a different world.
It definitely helped with that. So whether that was intentional or not, I don't know.
So, okay, so at this point, you're like just getting into the show.
Mm-hmm. This is all the beginning.
What do you know at this point? Like, what are your expectations at this point?
So I knew a bit, but not a lot. My friend had told me the general, it's a play, Macbeth. There's going to be a mask. Like, literally, that's the reason I was so in. I was like, I want a mask. Because it was just, this mask was described to me as the old style plague masks with the nose. And I'm envisioning this, dainty black gothic mask with just eyes and a little bit of a nose that curves like a point, like a beak. And I'm thinking, this is going to look so cool, and I'll use it for like Halloweens or like parties, yada, yada, yada. And then come to find out it's the most horrific, terrifying, ghosty skeleton mask. It's white with like these sharp cheekbones, and it
kind of
covers
looks like the Mighty Ducks.
It covers your entire
like
mouth.
Like a hockey mask.
It's you need to look it up if you want to see the real. It's terrifying.
What I'm looking at right now, this mask, I would not describe it as a plague mask.
No,
it's not the image I have in my mind of a plague
exactly
mask.
Right.
First of all, it's not even black.
No, and it's not like. The plague mask had a beak of sorts. It was, I don't know. I
always picture them having a pretty long one, too.
Yeah, very much misled on that account. So I was a little disappointed since I had literally signed up for this because I wanted a mask so badly. I mean, aside from the fact that my friends wanted to do it and I was going to do it with them, but I was very excited about the mask.
I guess, like, you just have to cut corners on the mask when you're paying for all the actors. And sets.
I'm okay with that. If they are, I really very much hope they're getting well paid because they truly, truly deserve it. And I'll take this crappy mask and, never wear it, but it's fine. So I essentially just knew, there'd be a mask, you're going to do Macbeth, it's going to be essentially weird interpretive dancing, and there'll be sets all over the place. It's going to be a lot of floors, stories going on different floors. But I really didn't have any expectations. I just thought, I'm going to go into this being, like, open-minded. Things are going to happen. Who knows what happens? I don't know. So once we go through that hallway, we come out to an open bar of sorts. And it's kind of like cabaret style. So on the right, there's a bar with, bartenders. Straight ahead, there's a woman with, like, a punch bowl of some kind of liquor mixture of sorts, and then there's a stage with an old-timey microphone and a piano.
Is it like a functioning bar, like you can actually drink and just sit and watch a show?
Yes. There's chairs everywhere, there's alcohol. My two friends got drinks there, and they were of course, like, fancy elderflower, champagne, and yada yada yada, like all. And
is this like you pay for it as well?
Yes, of course. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you can hang out there, and also that's kind of a way back point. That's where we return at the end, and they had told us if ever we get, I don't know, too stimulated, too much is happening during the events, that we can go back down there and kind of sit and take a breather. So that's kind of like the starting point of sorts, and that's where we kind of hang out until they call our number, or not our number, but our playing card. So I guess it is a number. I got an ace.
So they say all the aces come around.
Yeah. So they say all the aces come up, and we go up there, and they are going to hand you a mask, and everyone that's a visitor, that's there to experience it, has to put a mask on, but all the actors don't have masks on, so that's how you know someone is an actor or not. And that's when you first meet, I guess you would call them actors. They're the ones that are shepherding you up, but they're kind of, I guess, low-level ones because you don't see them again. But they're the ones that give you a little bit of the background at the start.
What role are they playing?
I don't know what else they did because I never saw them again. So it was a guy who, like, led us there. There was, like, a noise at one point, and I made some joke about someone dying, and he, like, reached out and grabbed me and was like, "Oh, no, dear. That happens later on in the night." And that was, like, I don't know, I guess he was just, like, prepping people. So
are they, and they're in costume?
Yeah, so he was wearing, a nice suit. And then there was a woman who was wearing, like, a cabaret-style dress with, nice pinned hair and everything.
So, like, do you kind of take it that are they, like, outside of the story? Like, they're aware of a story happening elsewhere?
So they're I think they're, like, they're the ones that give you the background, which is not a lot. They know of the actors. Honestly, I'm not certain. If you went down there during the time, they may have done something. Like, they may have had more to do.
Yeah.
Because when we did finish and leave, there was a woman singing there. And she was a singer of sorts. So they're actors of some sense, but they're not the same as the ones that.
Right.
To my knowledge, I mean, I don't know. We could have gone down there and they could have been doing something crazy or something. Who knows? But we get our number called, and she shepherds a group of us, 10 or 15 people, in an elevator. And this is where they first hand out the masks, and they tell us, these are your masks. The rule is that these always have to stay on the entire time, and the other rule is that you may not talk at all. And really, that's all the background they give you. She says, fortune favors the bold. You can explore, you can look around, touch things, but do what you want. And they also recommend from there, don't stay in a group, go on your own, because this is a individual experience and people can experience something different. That's really all they give you at the beginning. They start, and there are a total of 5 floors, so they kind of let us off in sections. So they let a couple off on one floor and a couple on another floor. And I was left off last, and I had heard something about, the last person on the elevator or something like that got a good experience or something. So I was like trying to look around, and I thought at the back of the elevator there was a black curtain, and I was convinced there was something behind the curtain. So I spent, everyone left the elevator, and I pulled the curtain back, and I was pushing the door of the back, and I was like, there's something here, there's something here. There's nothing there.
All right.
So yeah.
False start
yeah.
From the
So I was
get-go.
like, gosh darn it. I was like, I thought I had it. I was like, oh, already going to be great. But yeah, so no, I left off the elevator. I split pretty quickly. The first thing I saw was we got off into a creepy cemetery of sorts. It was kind of like an old crumbly ruined place with a lot of brick walls that were in statues and things like that.
So how is this looking to you when the elevator doors open up, and instead of seeing a hallway or a corridor, you're just seeing a wide open space?
No, there is a hallway of sorts. So you open and you go into a corridor, and then it splits off into rooms. And so to the left, I could see some rooms with furniture and things like that. And then I can't remember exactly. It's very, very disorienting because there's so many rooms and things like that. But the first kind of area I had walked into was this cemetery strip of sorts, and I actually didn't want to go down it because it looked really, really creepy, but my friend was pushing me to keep going. She's like, no, go. And so she pushed me through, and I walked through the ruins, and then you come to another room, and in that room was a bedroom scene with a tub in the middle, and there were 2 actors in the middle of fighting each other. It was a woman and a man, and they were having a lover's spat fight in the bedroom, and it was
this is so weird,
intense. And this was the first thing I saw, really, this first scene, and they were not yelling, but the woman was actually making some noises of shovey sounds.
They can't talk.
They don't talk. No.
They're play fighting.
Yeah,
so they're acting fighting out.
So they're pushing and pulling, and there's all against the wall, there are dressers and drawers stacked on top of each other, and they're jumping on top of them and flipping up and over, and they're using the whole space. And they even come into the audience of sorts. They walk by, and they'll walk by what we call the white mask, which is just, one of us or someone, and the white mask person will, have to move backwards to allow them the space to keep going and things like that. And they're just, it's wonderful to see how talented they are at recognizing where people are and knowing, where they can go in the room. It's very, very synchronized. They know where to hit where, and they know how to bypass people and kind of maneuver them as they need to.
As a audience member, or whatever you want to call it, you could just walk anywhere into the room.
Anywhere.
You could walk right to where they're standing and
stand
next to them.
Yeah. There's a general, understanding of sorts that you kind of give a little bit of space between the actors, especially in fight sequences like that. But I will say that there are, aside from white masks, there are people in black masks, and they're all in black, and they have a black mask, and they're essentially people that kind of monitor everything. So there's essentially one station in every room or so, and they make sure that everything's going okay, no one's getting hurt. If something goes wrong, they'll attend to it. They'll just kind of watch and make sure everything is fine. And sometimes they'll also guide people. So if you need to move, a white mask needs to move so they're not in the space of an actor, they'll guide you. They'll kind of tap you and move you. So, for instance, one time I got pushed to the masked person took me aside and like moved me over because I was in the middle of what was going to become a fight scene.
Okay.
And so that's how they kind of move you without the actor. Some actors do, but they can also do it as well. So yeah, that was my first scene was this couple just fighting at each other, crazy at each other. And I'd looked down and there were paper pages on near the bathtub there. And you can read what you want. You can, grab what you want. So I picked it up and I saw that it was a love letter of sorts that said, to my dearest love, and it was signed Macbeth. And I was like, oh, I found Macbeth already, which apparently is supposed to be kind of hard if you don't know. Right. You don't know who he is because you just go into it. And I was like, I think that's Macbeth and Lady Macbeth fighting. So it was really cool to see that. Apparently that's one of the coolest scenes because, they're fighting and it's just crazy to see. And essentially, you can really do it as you want. You could follow an actor because they go through the story, which I should mention that they go through the Macbeth story 3 times. You're there for 3 hours and they rotate the story 3 times. So it will come to completion 3 whole times. So you could follow an actor one time the whole way through if you wanted to, and then the next time you could stay in a room and say just follow the events of the room the whole time. Or the other time you could just explore and go across different places if you wanted. You could do whatever you want. So after the Macbeth fighting scene, I could have followed Macbeth or I could have followed Lady Macbeth, and I could have been, chosen to follow their storyline. But instead I just started wandering because the sets are so cool to look at. They were crazy. There's like a taxidermy office. There's a voodoo place. There's a candy shop. There's a forest. You go upstairs and there's a whole forest with a maze. It's crazy.
I can't wrap my mind around the layout. So like what?
Neither can I. I think that's part of why it's confusing because there's a total of 4 or 5 floors.
So
there's 5.
Does it feel more like a repurposed hotel or does it feel more like a repurposed warehouse? Do you know what I mean?
I would say warehouse because it's not like all the rooms are different sizes and like it's not like the way I don't know if they've also like cut down things or certain ways, but the corridors are very narrow. They're very dark. If it was a hotel, I would expect it to be like the rooms are all similar sizes here and there.
And you walk
and they
down
kind of have a general
one.
pattern to it. Yeah. But this is like every floor is different. It just looks it's crazy to see. Like you can't really gauge any sense of it. I think you could go multiple times and still not know the exact floor plan because aside from the fact that there's all these rooms, there's also secret passageways and secret like nooks and crannies. So there's places that people can hide. There's doors that are sometimes locked but sometimes unlocked depending on who's in it. So yeah, so that's why honestly one of the cool parts is just exploring the rooms. And it's so hard to know what to do because you want to follow an actor, but then you're also like, I just want to see the set design because the set design is like beautiful. There's so many different things happening that you just want to explore, and you can read anything you want and all this. So you just don't know where to start.
It seems like at first glance, it's weird that you would run the same show 3 times in a row.
Yeah.
But after the fact, it's almost not enough times.
Exactly. It's so weird. Especially, I had my phone on me, and so I checked my phone, and I saw that it was like an hour and a half in, and I felt like I had been there for days. I was like, I've been in this place. I've been in this time warp where I've just been here for hours and hours. And even though I knew that the story finished in an hour, I was like, did the story end? Because I didn't know it ended. You can sometimes go, there's like an ending scene and you can go there, but I hadn't gone there the first time. I only picked it up the second time.
So there's no defining.
So yeah, so I was like, where did it end? And nothing ever repeated for me. Actually, there's one scene that did, but I'd seen it at different points, so I didn't even recognize that they were the same scene at first. And then once it got to the end, I thought, oh my gosh, how did it end so quickly? They just started. And so the time, it was crazy how the time worked. It felt like forever, but then it also felt super quick and short, like nothing had happened or anything like that. So
this is okay. So we're at your first run through. You've just seen the first fight scene, and now you've decided to go explore.
Yes, my friend had told me that there was a forest, And I was like, that is my jam. I love forests. I love trees. It sounded amazing. So I was like, I'm going to go explore this. I knew it was on the top floor. So I went to the stairs and, well, first let me say, when I had started to explore, it's a little creepy at first when you're on your own because you're just walking and you can find like a dead end where there's no one there. And it was a little eerie, but I got over that feeling really quickly. It was eventually just fun to see everything. And there's something about, everyone's there and that there are other actors and things like that just around the corner. So I was never really uncomfortable in that sense. But I will say at first I was like, oh, this is weird. And I was like, oh, I have to go alone. I'm on my own. My friends are here. And then I just like completely forgot about that. I was like, no, this is great. So I just want to say that. It was a little creepy at first, but I got past it. So I went up trying to go to this forest that I'd heard about. I walked up to the staircase. The stairs are really narrow, and there's a lot of them because you have to get, from the bottom to the top floor. So I went all the way up to the top floor with the forest. I got off. There's a couple other rooms up there, but I pretty immediately found the forest. I had really two goals on this before coming in, which was to go to the forest and also to go to a candy shop, because apparently they had said you can find a candy shop and you can take any of the candy that you want. And I was like, that sounds amazing. I'm in. So first goal, I was like, I'm going to find the forest. So I went up and I found the forest, and it was like a maze essentially. And the trees were very spindly and bare. It wasn't like a lush forest of greenery. They were kind of like branches.
Okay.
But it was cool because the atmosphere was just eerie, and they had kind of fog, and it was cool, like you had stepped outside but you're still inside. It was so open that it was cool, and there was kind of chirping going as if there were crickets or something like that. Huh. And it just had this cool feeling. And I walked up and I could see two people on the side, and they were in white masks, and they were in like the maze, and I could see that it was a maze. And then I thought to the left, it looked like there was a clear shot, and I was like, I'm not going through the maze. I don't want to get stuck in here. So I went to the left, and I could see at the end of the left there was a hut in the corner, just like a small cottagey hut thing, like a circle. I was like, oh, I'll go check this out. So I walked around, bypassed the people, walked to the hut, and I passed by the hut, and there's a little cut window. And as I pass by, I glance in it, and I see what looks like a figure. And I like startle. I'm like, oh, it's a mannequin. It's fine. And so I stand there and I look, and she's staring back at me. And I said, that's not a mannequin. That's a person. And it was an actress. She was standing in the hut holding like a book or something like that. And she just was staring. And I thought, well, fortune favors the bold. I'm going to stare right back at her. So I just stared at her.
That seems like a questionable decision from my perspective.
Nope. I was like going hard in. And I will say that I knew about another aspect of this, which is what they call one-on-ones. When you follow a person, sometimes they will choose someone to have a one-on-one experience with, where they'll take you into another room separate from all the other people, and they'll do a scene for you one-on-one. And in these one-on-ones, sometimes they'll talk to you. And honestly, you don't know what they're going to do, but they can do whatever. But they're specific one-on-ones that no one else is supposed to have them, and it's kind of this opportunity to have another scene. And I was staring at this lady, and I had heard something about on one-on-one with a nurse in a hut or something, and I was like, huh. So I stared at her for a bit, and she puts down the book that she's reading, and she goes for the door, and she opens the door, and she walks down the steps, and she's still staring at me. I'm staring right back at her, and she takes out her hand, and she grabs my hand, and she leads me up into the hut.
Oh, no.
And so I go into the hut. We're both in the hut. She closes the door, locks the door, closes the window that was open, locks the window, and she's still staring at me, just staring. And
this is so weird.
It's a tiny, tiny hut, and she motions. There's two chairs. She motions to the one chair, as if for me to sit down. So I sit down, and then she looks at me and she motions towards my mask. And I was like, what's going on here? And she grabs my mask and takes it off, and she sets it onto the chair next to, or no, there's a table next to me. She sets it onto that table next to me, and she sits down, and she goes over and reaches and grabs a pot of tea. And so she stands up, has the tea, grabs another pot of what looks like cream, and she looks at me like as if asking, do you want cream in this tea? And I said, I didn't say anything, actually. I just said, nod. I nodded with my head. Because there's the thing, I didn't know if I was allowed to talk. Because they tell you in the
they said not
thing,
to already.
Don't talk. So I thought.
And she wasn't talking.
She wasn't talking. And I was like, okay, well, I'll mimic her. I won't talk. So I just, enthusiastically nodded my head like, yes, I want some cream. And so she put some cream in it. And then she reached for a thing of sugar. And she looked at me again, and I nodded my head. Yeah, okay, I'll take some sugar. So she put cream and sugar, and she mixed it. And she brought the tea and sat down next to me and put the tea in my hands. So I was holding a saucer and then the teapot, or not the tea, but the teacup. And then she took a spoon, she mixed it, lifted it, and spoon-fed me some tea. 3 spoons of tea. And on the last sip, she had kind of pushed it forcefully in my mouth, so it kind of dribbled a little bit, which I think was intentional, because then she kind of made a, oh no, gesture. She's still not talking, and she reached around her and grabbed a napkin, and she looked down and like dabbed at my lap as if to clean a spot that it wasn't there, nothing had dropped.
Yeah.
And then she looked up, looked at me, and then dabbed the corner of my mouth as if to clean my mouth off. And then she set it down. And we stared for a little bit more, because that was a very big theme among us. We just stared a lot. And then she started to tell me a story. So she started talking about this orphan girl who was alone in the world, and how she wanted to go to the moon, but the moon was desolate and no one was there. So she wanted to go to the sun, but the sun was prickly and bad, so she didn't go to the sun. So she wanted to go to the earth, but the earth was barren, or something like that. And just, it was a very depressing story that ended with, and the girl's still alone to this day.
Was it about her? Is that...
No idea.
And what's her character?
So she was considered either a nurse or a matron. She was wearing, the typical nursery style hat of the old ways. I have no idea what the story meant. But she finished telling the story, looked sadly at me as she did the entire time we had the experience, and then she leaned in close to my face, like nose to nose almost, and she said, blood must have blood. And then she leaned back, she took the mask, placed it back on my head, and she opened the door and walked me down out. And funnily enough, when she had opened the door, there was a group of about 2 or 3 people that were just outside the hut, white masks, that had either been...
They were like waiting for you?
Because a lot of people come to this experience knowing things that are going to happen, because same things happen all the time, essentially.
Right.
They don't change that often. So I don't know if they were waiting because they knew she was in the hut, and I don't know if they knew I was in it, but I walked down, and I come down it, and she walks back into the hut, and she closes it, and like she's off in the hut, and the people, she doesn't do anything with them. But it was really funny too, because I look down, and across the room I see my friend right at the end of the hallway, and she tells the story later to me about how she was walking up to the forest, and she thought, hey, this is a really cool forest, I'm going to check this out. And she said, I walked down and I saw this hut, and I thought, that's a really weird hut, what's going on there? And then she said, I know, I was looking, and then the door opened, and who do I see walking down with the nurse leading her but Sarah? Sarah's just walking down there.
You popped out of the hut.
Yeah. And she was like, it was very weird. I was like, why was she in the hut? But yeah, that was a one-on-one experience that I had.
So what's...
Super creepy.
Yeah, what was your reaction at the time? Because when you're telling the story, I'm like, this is creepy, this is weird, I don't like this.
Yes.
I don't want to be here.
So here's the thing. I knew about this one-on-one experience. My friend had told me there was going to be a nurse up in the forest. And now I did not go up there planning for this to happen. I had actually forgotten about it, and I was just thinking, I want to go into a forest because it sounds really cool. But she had told me, oh, there's a character sometimes who's upstairs in the forest that when you go into her hut, she'll feed you tea. So I knew kind of what was happening, and it was just surreal then. It wasn't like, I wasn't anxious or anything like that. It was just like a weird, like, oh, what's happening here? This is kind of cool. So I wasn't freaked out. But something happened later to me that I wasn't expecting, where I was much more freaked out for it. But this was a really nice, just like weird, because it's, why is this lady feeding you tea? But I wasn't like scared or anything like that. It was just like this is kind of cool, and this is neat that she picked me. And it's just, you know, it's cool how the circumstances happened where I just happened to walk by at that time. You know, the couple that were there, they didn't see her, they didn't go towards her, and she chose me for some reason. You know, it could just be because I stood there for a while. I don't know if I had looked at her and then like kind of just stared for a bit and left. I don't know if she could tell that I was receptive to it or why she picked it, but it's just a really cool thing that I was like, yeah, I got this one-on-one experience that other people didn't get.
So is this part of the story overall? Or is this an isolated incident that's supposed to have separate meaning?
So
is there a meaning to it?
For the one-on-ones, the way I understand it, and I don't know if this is correct or not, I kind of see them as separate. All the actors are going through this storyline that all relates to each other in some way. You know, they're doing this and that. And then I think they wanted to make more of an immersive experience in some way, so they had all these characters have this opportunity to do one-on-ones, and they're kind of related in some sense. So, you know, she's a nurse, so she was feeding me tea, which also they said later was supposed to be poisoned tea, which I was like, how was I supposed to know that? And also, like, why is she poisoning me? Like, I don't know. I heard that from someone. I don't know if that's true or not. But so it's generally related to her in some instance, and I don't know, I think that story may be from Macbeth, and so that might be...
We really should have researched Macbeth before we started talking.
I should have researched it before I went to it. But it's kind of related in some way, but the way I was looking at it as this is a separate immersive experience that's kind of like a bonus for some people that they can get. It's not necessarily integral to the storyline, especially because of the fact that only certain people get to see it. It's just a cool, neat thing that people really want to have happen to them because it's this really neat personal experience. So that was my first one-on-one, because I had another.
So there's more.
Yes. Actually, I had another and a half. Essentially, after that happened, I walked around a bit. At one point, there was a woman in a bathtub that was naked, washing herself. There's some nudity that happens in this, I will say. There was another point where I went downstairs and I saw a card game, and 3 guys were playing cards with each other, and they were swinging a light at each other to kind of, you know, like in a interrogations type style.
Yeah.
They nailed a card to a wall. There was just a lot of other crazy things happen. There's so much that goes on, and it's so hard to follow the story. But to lead into my next one-on-one experience, I had walked down and I happened upon my friend who was in a room and was watching this guy cut paper. It was very weird. I have no idea what he was doing. And you're not supposed to talk, but we were kind of whispering to each other because she was showing me a necklace that she had received from a one-on-one that she had, and she had told me, you should follow this guy, he has a good storyline, or something to that effect. Later, come to find out, she actually pointed out the wrong guy to me, and she wanted me to follow someone else, but luckily, nice. I got this amazing experience by following this guy. So I started following this character because he seemed interesting. I found out through watching him that he was a detective of sorts, and he was in his detective shop when I first saw him, and he's in there, and then he gets up and goes downstairs. So he goes down like 3 flights of stairs, and there's a group of like, I don't know, 7 or 8 of us that are just following him as he, essentially runs down these stairs. And that's the other thing about this. It's really hard because a couple of people will follow a character, and you have to go fast so that you don't lose track of them, because you could just, if the person in front of you is not fast enough, they lose them, and then you're screwed because you just lose them as well. So I went downstairs. When we walk down to this basement that's like a study of sorts, it kind of looks like, there's a man, an actor, just sitting in a chair in the middle of the room. And I'm like, what's going on here? And the guy I'm following comes in, takes off his coat and his hat, and he goes into a closet and grabs out some shaving cream and like the brush that they use, and then the razor, like the old-fashioned razor styles, that are just like that one blade.
Oh yeah.
And he goes to the man in the chair and he puts the shaving cream on his face, and he proceeds to shave him. Like, we're just watching this guy shave another guy. Very weird. And there's a big crowd around us now. There's, maybe 12 or 15 people. And some of the people are from the guy I followed. Some were already there just watching this guy. My friend actually ended up coming there at one point. And we're just watching these two guys shave each other. And it's this weird dance. There's this tension, which I thought was sexual tension, because it was like, oh, are you going to kill him? But are they going to kiss, or is something going to happen? Come to later find out that they were father and son. So I don't know where I was picking up that weird sexual tension.
A bit of a mystery.
Yeah. But that's kind of, the whole play is just kind of filled with that weird tense vibe. But they're kind of like the play fighting, yada yada. They shave and they're done. They're, getting ready for a later scene, a ball scene. But when they're done, I keep following my guy, who then proceeds to run up 4 flights of stairs. So I'm running up these 4 flights of stairs because I want to keep following him, because I heard he has a great storyline. So we go back up to his detective shop, and we're in the shop, and a woman comes, and he has a scene with this woman where they're, they show some photos, and I think it's like a missing person or something like that. But essentially, their scene ends. There's some more sexual attention there as well, since that was common among every actor, it seemed. And he goes into the corner of his detective office, which has some photos strung up, kind of like a dark room of sorts. And I stand against the wall of that corner. So he's in front of me, and he's doing something with evidence or something of that sort. And he turns around. And when he turns around, he's staring. And I stare right at him because, eye contact. That's a very important part of this whole show.
So that's like how you agree to the experience.
I guess, because that seems to me how if you can kind of, I guess, convey in your eyes, and they can pick it up if you're willing or not. But whatever happened, he turned around and we just stared for a split second, and then he put his hand out and he grabbed my hand, and we're running. He runs with me into another room. And he runs and loses the people, because people are trying to follow us, because everyone wants a one-on-one. They want that attention or what have you. So he runs with me, and he goes into another room, and he slams the door shut. And we're now in this very tiny, dimly lit room. And he has an egg in his hand.
Okay.
Why? Who knows? But he has an egg in his hand, and he's behind me, and he has the egg, and it's reached out in front of me, and we start walking the pace of the room, and he's bringing the egg closer and closer to my face as we're walking, and he's behind me, kind of pushing me into the room. Mm-hmm. I don't know what that's about, but we get to a table, and on the table there's a box, and he opens the box, and inside the box is a magnifying glass, and he starts telling another story. He starts talking to. This is definitely, I looked it up, some Macbeth storyline, some, lines from the thing. He's talking about a falcon and an eagle and all this nonsense that I don't understand. And then he has the egg, and he places it in my palm, and he puts his hand over top of my hand with the egg, and he pushes down, and it cracks. And I'm thinking, holy crap, he just cracked an egg, and there's going to be yolk all over me. And now I have to walk around this place with yolk on my hand. And he moves his hand on top, or off of mine, and he brings it up, and it's not yolk, it's dirt. Just a pile of dirt. And he comes with his mouth over, and he blows the dirt off. He dusts most of it off, and he takes his finger, and he presses down on the palm of my hand, like along my lines, And this is something that the lady had done as well, where she like pressed into my lines as if to read my hand or something like that. And he then, I don't remember at what point, but I don't know if this was first or after, but he lifts up my masks and he takes the magnifying glass and he gets super close to my face and he just says, "Who are you? What have you learned?" And then he puts the magnifying glass down and then he shoves me against the wall, like forcibly pushes me against the wall. He's holding me there, like with his arm against the wall. And he comes and puts his mouth right near my ear. So he's like leaning on my cheek. He's right there and he starts whispering in my ear. And he starts saying, "Blood must have blood," again. And it's super intense. And he's starting to say the blood must have blood. And after he had been whispering in my ear, he steps back and he starts coughing as he's saying it. So he'll be like, "Blood must have blood must have," and he's coughing and coughing, and he takes my hand and puts it up near his mouth, so he's, his mouth is just like over my hand, and he coughs into my hand, and I can feel something has come onto my hand, and he takes his hand and covers my hand and clasps it over it, and then I hear a bell ring, and he scurries out the door, and I'm left. And might I add that at the point when he had taken my mask off, it was pitch black in there. Like, I could not see him. That's why some of this I cannot remember perfectly, because it was pitch black darkness. Like, when he was against me and he was pushed against me, zero light. I could only feel what he was doing and feel myself against the wall.
Stuck against the wall in the darkness.
In the dark with this man, super tall guy, alone in this room, pushed against me. And so I stumble out of the room. It just, I'm stumbling out with the mask still off me. I come out to a group of white masks who are staring at me because I'm stumbling like I'm like walking home after a one-night stand or something. Like I'm like, ugh, and like I have to just dishevel my hair and like put my mask back on, and I unfurl my hand, and down in my palm there's a feather. Just a single black feather. And I was like, was that in his mouth? Or I'm still not certain how he did the coughing bit. It was very warm. I don't know if that definitely means it was in his mouth or if he had just like breathed heavily on my hand. But that was my second experience.
That's
and that
crazy.
One was very intense because I had no idea anything that was happening. It was just the intensity of being in this dark room with this guy that I didn't know. I was never like uncomfortable or fearful of my safety in any way. Like I would definitely say they're really good about that. Like you don't feel like you're
I'm
going
not sure
to be.
how.
I don't know. Like it's like it's weird because there's this aspect of me being like I have no idea where he's going to take this, but I was also like, I don't know, they're a pretty reputable place and like there haven't been any incidences of anything happening. If anything, there's actually been incidents of the opposite where a lot of the white mask patron people will like grope and touch actors thinking that they can do that. But it was an intense experience is all I can say.
Yeah, I mean, if you're at a show, you have this feeling, in the back of your mind that it's not real, but I feel like there's so many factors telling you that this is too real.
Yeah.
That I feel uncomfortable listening to it.
I will say it's weird for both of my one-on-ones. There's like this aspect where I always like in the back of my head I'm like, this is another person who's just like regular person like me who like after the show is going home back to their apartment, going to have dinner, going to do this, and it's like crazy to think that they're in this character and they're doing this really weird thing to you, and like how weird that must be for them. I mean, I guess they're used to it now, but I'm like, oh, is this really weird for them to have to like do this every night to someone? Like how, I don't know how
and
that works.
It's just like blasé to them. They're just like, all right, I gotta shove somebody against a wall 6 more times tonight.
Yeah, like that's just another day at the office. But yeah, that one was crazy and unexpected, and but still like super cool to experience, just to see, what happens.
So, did they say blood must be blood?
Blood must have blood, which I do know is a line from the play.
Okay, yeah.
It's related to the fact that Macbeth is killing all these people, and they're like, you're gonna die.
Right.
Well, okay. I think actually he might say that. He acknowledges that he himself
Right. So Macbeth says blood will have blood, and because he knows that there will be consequences
to his actions. Yeah.
So basically, all these one-on-ones are meant to have like symbolism back to the original story.
Yes, and like I said, I know with the guy, because I had looked up some of what he was saying, and they were lines from Macbeth.
Okay.
Like, the eagle flies at midnight. It wasn't that, but, something like that.
Okay.
But, like, the dirt egg, I don't know what that was supposed to mean. The feather, no idea what that meant. Like, I don't know if that's just weird things that they...
Yeah, so I wonder, like, if you're a Shakespeare buff, are you just like, oh my god, it's Shakespeare's black feather egg?
Obviously, yeah. Well, there were like crows and stuff, so the feather could be from that, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
Who knows? But yeah, those were really intense. And then I had a last, what I call half of a one-on-one, because after I had been exploring everywhere, I came back to Macbeth's bedroom, and who do I find in the bedroom but the nurse that I saw earlier, the same lady. And I was like, I wonder what she's doing down here. And she was like cleaning the bathtub and making the bed. It was really close to the end. I knew that there were only a couple minutes left and it would be the end scene. And I was tempted to walk away because I was like, I want to see something else. But I was also like, this lady is so intriguing to me because I had that one-on-one and I was like, I want to know more about her story. So I just kind of watched her for a bit. And she still has those same sad eyes as before. She's just sad the entire time, I think. But she comes off down from the bed and she kind of walks into the white mask audience members, and there's a person, and she starts to stare at them, and I visibly see the white mask walk backwards as if like to brace themselves, and like they kind of must not have wanted them to come near.
They said no.
Yeah, essentially. That's the only way I could think of it. And so she walked past, and when she walked past, she came to me. And I was like, I know the deal with this lady. I was like, give her some good old death stare with the eyes. And she's like...
So can she recognize you at this point?
That's the other thing. I don't know. Because I had the one-on-one with her, which I think was during the first one. And this was the very last scene. So this is after the 3 hours, essentially. I'm wearing the same thing. I wasn't wearing a very recognizable shirt. I was wearing like a shirt with some flower pattern on it. But maybe there's... I do think some of my friends think that may have been the case, that they can recognize you and know. But so she starts staring at me, and I do what I do, and I stare back at her. And we just stare for a bit, and she puts out her hand and reaches for mine. And she grabs me, and we start running, as is always the case.
Of course.
So we run, and we go up to a balcony to watch the very final scene. And the last scene is kind of like a Last Supper type scene, where the main characters are all sitting on a table. A couple of them are like supposed to be dead, but they're still there. Just, I don't know, symbolism or something like that. And they're all in slow motion, like they're kind of talking, and you can see them go like, oh, move to a side and move to another side, but very slowly, as if they're talking and drinking. And we go up to the balcony, and she puts my hand on the banister of the balcony, and she takes her hand and just covers my hand. And we proceed to watch the ending scene while she's just holding my hand. At this point, I'm like, am I supposed to like look at her? Am I supposed to look at the scene? Like, what am I supposed to do? So I spend most of the time looking at the scene. At one point, I look over at her. She catches me looking, and we stare at each other for another good like 2 solid minutes, which is like 2 minutes, but felt like eternity. And then I never break gaze ever with her, because I was like, there's something about her eyes that I was like captivated. So she breaks the gaze and she starts looking at the scene again. So I think, okay, I'm supposed to look at the scene. And then I noticed that they pull down a noose and Macbeth is standing. And when that happens, she takes her other hand and puts it on top of mine, and she starts like putting pressure on my 2 hands, like as if she knows what's coming, and she's like holding on to me. And then they put the noose around Macbeth's head. And at that point, she takes her hands from mine and she puts her hands on my shoulders. And she's kind of a little bit behind me, and her hands are on my shoulders. And at this point, the music is changing. So drums are starting to go a little bit louder. And you know what's going to happen. You know what's about to happen. And it's picking up pace. And as the the music beats up faster and faster, she takes her hands and she squeezes my shoulders harder and harder and harder and harder until eventually the noose is he's, you know, I don't know if it was a table or a chair that he was under. It's pulled out from under him and he's hanging, and she lets go. She lets go of my shoulders and like releases. And it was crazy. Like it made the intensity of the scene so much more than I think it would have been had I watched it on my own. And it was just like crazy to feel it. And then, you know, Macbeth is swinging from his noose and the scene is over. And you know that that's the end, like that's the last scene, so it's finished, and she takes my hand and she starts leading me away, and I'm thinking, oh my god, we're gonna have like another one-on-one,
you get that bonus encore.
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, this is great. And so she's leading me through all these people, and might I say that everyone is very jealous of the fact that you're with someone. So like the whole time that her hand is on mine on the banister, there's white masks all around just like staring at her and staring at me like, who is this girl and how did she get this?
It's like, that's the same flower shirt girl from before.
Like, why does she keep getting this? But so she takes me and she leads me to the bar, the very beginning bar place where we started all of this.
She's like, get the hell out of here.
And she takes me to the curtain where we first started, and she puts me there. She like stops there, lets go of my hand, stares at me for a little bit, and she goes and then she hugs me. And I'm just hugging her for, you know, a little bit. She lets go, she stares at me again a little bit more, and then she walks behind the curtain and leaves. And then I'm just standing there in a daze, like, oh, that's it? What happened? What's going on? Anything else? No.
Weird.
And that was the end of it. And so what I've come to find out is that at the end, it seems like all the characters do this, where they pick a person and they take them to that end place, drop them off there, and then they go. And that's kind of their way to get everyone at the end and back to like that starting point. For instance, one of my friends had been down at the end scene on the floor, and the people at the main table had walked away, and she locked eyes with one of the guys, and he grabbed her hand and walked her to there, the same place I was at, and he stationed her there and then like gave her a kiss on the cheek and then left. So like they kind of bring everyone there as their like end point, and then it's over and you're all in the bar. And we immediately left because it was just like, too much. We couldn't keep staying there. We'd been there for days, it seemed like.
So I'm still curious about the nurse though. Like, is the nurse a character from Macbeth? Is she supposed to be somebody? Was she in love with him? Did she?
No, I think she had. I was trying to read about her, and it sounds like she has a fight sequence before I showed up at the hut with another lady, because I can't tell. I don't know if she was the nurse or a matron, and apparently those are two different characters. It sounded like she may have been the matron and she was having a fight with another nurse or something like that. I don't know. I thought she was like a caretaker and she was helping out and things like that, because she was so sad about everything. I thought, oh, she knows what's going on. She knows, like, part of the Macbeth story is I think Lady Macbeth kind of goes crazy from everything that's happening, and I thought, oh, she must know what's going on and she knows what's going to happen. And that's why at the end when Macbeth is hanged, she's, you know, like so worried and looking with those intense eyes, and like she's like, I thought she was holding my hand to like comfort me, and like the squeezing was just kind of like, you know, oh, this is intense, this is crazy, and then like the release of it's over, like it's done. But that's the thing, I didn't follow her any other time throughout the night, so I don't know the rest of her story. She could have had a whole other scene with all these other characters, but you don't see that because I just chose not to follow her any longer. So she could have had a really big backstory for all I know. But I just got those glimpses of her.
You think that she was just lonely and sad because of all the death?
That's how I felt. However, then someone had told me, oh, that tea is supposed to be poison tea, and I was like, that's not what I was getting vibes from her. But maybe I'm just very bad at reading people. She seemed really nice to me. I thought we very much connected. I was trying to empathize with her with my eyes. Like, I feel your sadness. That's why. That's also why I thought she had picked me. I thought, oh, she recognizes that I'm trying.
That you're sad and lonely too.
She sees herself in me. But yeah, it was.
Okay, so
crazy.
So I have a bunch more questions for you.
And can I also interject that I have not told you anything about the rave, which I feel like
we
should talk about.
I have some overall questions, but I have two specific questions first.
Okay.
First of all, I want to hear about this rave. I know nothing about it except that it is intense, and I don't know what that means.
Not even enough of a word to describe it.
And I also want to know more about something you haven't touched on too much, but the fact that there is nudity in the show, and I want to know what you thought of that and what that added to the experience for you.
Okay, well, this will go hand in hand because, of course, you can't have a rave without some nudity. So,
I mean, okay, questionably, you could have a rave without nudity.
Not a fun one.
In fact, when I think about raves, I usually don't picture nudity.
Nudity?
I think of lights.
You're not going to a good rave then, apparently.
Yeah, my rave experience is limited. So, anyways.
Okay, well, so this is my experience with the rave. I had been following someone for a bit, and they had led me into this room, and I didn't go into the room yet. I was just on the outside of the room, and as I look in, it's a foggy, misty room with some lights, and I see a woman in the center of the room, her arms outstretched, and she just starts a blood-curdling scream, like a high-pitched, like, I don't even want to do it on here because it would be too mad, but just like a high-pitch, imagine intense screech, and I think, nope, and I turn around, and I do not go in there, because I was like, I was following this guy, but I don't know where he's leading me now, because I don't want this experience, so I turned away, and I walked, and I did something else, and I think that actually led to me doing the other one-on-one or something like that. But eventually, at one point, I met up with a friend again, and she said, have you been to the rave? Because, of course, we're still talking. We're not supposed to be. She said, you need to see the rave. Have you seen it? And I said, no. And she said, oh, follow this storyline. It will take you to the rave. So I'm following these people out in the hallway, and they take me back, and I go to the room where I see the girl doing the blood-curdling scream. And I said, of course, this is the rave.
Ah, yes, the rave.
So I walk into the room, and there's a lot of black masks in this room that are kind of leading you because they want to make sure that the actors have their place and that you're kind of around them so that they can do what they want and you're on the sideline. So when I'm walking in this room, I see a woman on the left side, and she's in a red dress, and she's just sitting there. And then on the right, there's all this other action, and there's a lot of white masks in front of me, and I can't really see that well. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to watch this girl in the red dress because no one's really looking at her and something good is going to happen. Essentially, nothing happens with her. I look at her for a while, and I'm like, nothing's going to pan out. She essentially watches the whole thing the whole time. The music starts getting loud, lights start going everywhere, and then strobe lights come on. I hate strobe lights. They are not a good sensation. And I'm standing at the back of a lot of white masks in front of me, and the lights are going on, and I can see like glimpses of people, of the actors, but I'm starting to get really nauseous because I don't do well with them. So I'm looking at the floor, and I'm thinking, I'm just gonna have to close my eyes this whole sequence because I can't move, because with strobe lights, moving is hard, and you can't tell, like, people were bumping into me because they couldn't tell where they were, because you can't see when someone's coming at you. So I was thinking, I'm just going to have to look at the floor this whole time. But I was like, no, I want to experience the rave. I want to see what's happening. So I start putting my eyes up, and as I'm glancing up, I see a goat mask. And I'm like, what is this? And I see it's connected to a limb, and I'm like, oh, it's a person. And I look down, and I see, and the person moves, and I see, oh, it's an entirely naked guy with a goat mask on his head.
All right.
And he's surrounded by some women who have their shirts, their dresses kind of askew, and so their breasts are out, and they're kind of like all dancing around each other.
It's like textbook rave.
Yeah, and essentially it seems like an orgy of sorts almost is happening. It's like weird. There's a guy with a goat mask who's naked, these half-naked ladies. There's, I think at one point, like blood everywhere, which people said smells like chocolate, and I do remember a chocolate smell, so everyone thinks that they use like chocolate syrup or something. And then at one point I turn and I see a woman has a bloody baby and is just holding the bloody baby up for a bit, And that goes back down. And then they're still dancing. Naked goat man's out and about, just prancing, doing his thing. And then Macbeth comes out, blood on his shirt, and he's standing up on a table, just kind of standing there with his arms outstretched. Then there's like a woman, and she's up on the on these two people's backs, and she's screaming. There's a lot of blood-curdling screaming going on. Honestly, that's really all I can tell you of what I experienced on this rave, because it was just flashes and a lot of weird things happening and just utter chaos of a rave.
Huh.
And that eventually it ends and people filter out and they walk away. And it's all... And actually, I ended up following the naked guy. I hadn't meant to, but I followed and turned around a corner and I watched him take a shower as he's like showering off the remnants of the rave from him. And
that's like just, not even the scene. He's just like trying to get cleaned up like, for the next part. So much.
And so he's like, yeah, he's just in the shower, laying in the shower, getting clean.
So that's supposed to be a post-murder sequence.
We think that that's actually that's like the prophecy sequence. Is what people were saying. That they think that's like the prophecies. We don't know what that baby though is, that bloody baby. But like it's all the witches. Which, will I say that Macbeth, there's like 3 female witches. That the guy is a witch. For whatever reason, they have a boy witch in this. So there's 2 female witches and a boy witch. And that's what the goat... Yeah, the goat naked guy was a witch.
Okay.
So... Yeah, for whatever reason, but he was amazing. Like, he's a really good actor. He did this sequence where he was on a pool table and he was like convulsing and seizing, which was terrifying because it looked so accurate. And he would like lift his whole body up and then slam his feet down on the table, so it sounded like he was like breaking. And the way that he did it, where I don't know how he wasn't causing himself physical pain because it seemed intense.
Maybe he was.
I mean, he breaks his legs every day.
That's method acting.
But yeah, so that was the rave scene in the best way that I could describe it. It's one of those things you have to be there to experience how utterly chaotic it is.
It sounds like that, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was... So for me... him and then the naked lady I saw in the bathroom. Those were the 2 nudity scenes that I saw. There are more, though. Apparently there's a scene where Macbeth is naked and, like, cleaning himself in the bathroom or something like that. But there are a couple of scenes like that. To me, it seemed like it was just furthering the story, and it kind of made it more intense. And like I said before, there's always kind of been this, like, sexual undertone to everything, it seemed like. Like, the way people dance and, like, it's just... I don't know, sensual in a sense, that it just seemed like that's an extension of it.
Is that part of Macbeth, or is that their interpretation of it, or?
I can't tell you since I don't know Macbeth well. It seems like it may just be their interpretation, although maybe with death and violence, some people would say that could go hand in hand. I don't know.
That's kind of the gist that I'm getting from the rave part, at least, is that they're just trying to tie all those things together.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. I can't tell you that... I don't know how different it would be if there wasn't nudity. Like, I don't know if, like, if he was just in some pants and, like, shirtless, if that would be, like, the same intensity. I think it made it a lot crazier that he was. Like, it made it, like, an intense experience that he was. And also kind of shocking because I wasn't really expecting there to be nudity. So, like, when I saw him, I was like, oh, okay, he just doesn't have anything on. Like, that's kind of weird. Yeah. So it was just, like, a little bit taken aback, which I think is kind of the whole thing about this is, like, they're just kind of trying to shock you in some things and, like, make it an intense experience for you in some ways. So it's just another part of that.
That's exactly the feeling I'm getting from it, because from the stories that I've heard, it's like, there's no reason that you need to have fully nude actors for this scene, but everything that I hear, it just makes me feel like I'm on my heels. Like you're pushing me back and I'm off balance, and you just want to keep me off balance for the whole story. And that's exactly the type of thing. You walk into a room and there's a naked goat man in the middle of the room. Yeah, I'm off balance.
Yeah. It's really cool how they do that, especially because they do some scenes where it's like the most mundane things, where it's like you find someone and they're just like sitting there, or like there's like a scene where like there's a guy just sitting praying or something like that, and there's like small things and you're like, oh, like nothing's really happening, but then like it picks up and they start dancing or something crazy happens. But it's also kind of neat that they have these smaller moments where not as much is happening to compare with when there's all these big things happening. I don't know. It's just a really cool way how they...
If you're trying to make somebody feel like they're in that world, you need small moments to balance out big moments, right?
Yeah.
Quiet to balance out the loud.
And I think it also does what you had said and puts you on your toes, because you're like, oh, is this going to change? Is something big going to happen? And then you're like, no, I'm just actually watching him just do something really...
Almost like a scary movie where you know something will happen, you just don't know when. Mm-hmm. And by not having something happen for a stretch, it's like building the anticipation and building the suspense. It sounds very intriguing.
Would you do it?
I've been thinking about this all day, because this is how I described it earlier. I said, the tone of your voice is so excited and so interested. It sounds amazing from the tone of your voice. But when I hear the descriptions,
what we say,
when I hear the words, none of that matches your tone. And so I'm off put just by the stories. So I don't know. On the one hand, I can say, yeah, I would be very uncomfortable there. But on the other hand, that's the experience that you're paying for.
Yeah. I mean, I think you would find it interesting. I feel like anyone would find it interesting because there's just so much going on, and you could really have any experience you want. Like, for instance, if you aren't into like the actor part, or like you're afraid of the one-on-one, or you're afraid of what they're doing, like you could literally go in just to explore the sets. Like you could go just to kind of walk through the whole place, map it out in your head, and kind of read the story through the papers or through anything you find, because that's cool in its own right. And like that's the other reason I love it so much. It's almost like a choose your own storyline. Like you can go where you want, you could follow who you want, you could decide that you want to follow a side character and not really see a lot of the action. You just want to kind of do a more slow moving thing where there's not a lot of action happening, and you could like avoid some of the places that are not going to be a lot. But I think it's just so neat how it, like, I don't know, it's so intense, and you just unexpect everything, and so it just makes this really cool visceral experience then, because you're not sure what's going to happen, and it's just so different from anything. Like, I couldn't compare this to any other thing I've seen. It's not like a Broadway play. It's not like, I don't even know, it's not like a theme park, it's not like an entertainment, it's not like rides, amusement park, or anything like that. It's just its own thing.
So at the beginning you said your life has changed since you've seen this show. So what I want to know is if you could describe in 1 or 2 sentences what about the show is so amazing to you. If you could just wrap it up into one package, like, why should everybody see this show? What makes it life-changing?
I don't know how to describe it. It's everything I've said. It's all of it. It's like the unexpected nature, the immersiveness of it, the being interactive. It's just the fact that it's so unique. Nothing else is like it. Like all of it's literally everything combined that makes it such a wonderful show that it will, like you said, it's tongue in cheek, but it is like so crazy. And I've spent the last like 3 days now talking about it, and I'm still not tired of talking about it.
Do you think everybody should give this a shot?
I do, because even people who think they wouldn't like it, I feel like they would have to like it, but not have to like it, but I feel like they would find something to like. But I mean, I don't know. I don't know if I was just really open-minded to it, and that really helped make the experience, I wasn't really rigid in thinking, oh, it's going to be this or it's going to look like this. So I was just kind of like open to anything happening. So I don't know if you put someone in front of me who only wants a traditional theater experience, I suppose they would hate it. But if anyone is at all interested in, something that's interactive or kind of being put on your toes and not knowing what's going to happen, to be unexpected, like this is for you. Or even if you're just interested in, I don't know, plays, or I just think that someone would find something that they would like.
Obviously, you guys loved the show,
Mm-hmm.
but if you had to critique it, what are the not as good parts? What are the bad parts?
I will say my main critique, and I can understand why they do this, but my main critique would be that you don't know the storyline. I can understand part of it's the unpredictability that they want, but as someone who doesn't know Macbeth, and maybe this is my own fault for not doing research of Macbeth, but to be thrown into it and not know anything made it very hard to follow the actual main storyline. So I still don't know the main storyline. I still could not piece it together for you. I know a little bit from here and there, the characters, and for me, that's something that would have been, I think, really helpful for me. Like, I just think it would have made the experience better for my personal experience. However, like I said, I can understand why they don't do that. Like, it's part of the experience of you're thrown into it, you don't know what's happening, you don't know who you're following, you're kind of disoriented. That's what they're going for. But I think that they could give you a little bit more of a background. And that also goes with, like, the rule thing. Like, if you were to go to this having no knowledge of what it was, like, you would be just screwed. Like, you would not know what was happening. You'd spend the first hour just disoriented and, like, in a corner, like, just, like, you know, you're shut down because you don't know what, like, you're like, why is there this mask? Why can I not talk? Like, do they talk to me? Can I ever talk? Like,
or you spend like an hour at the bar and you're like, oh, I thought this was a really expensive bar
yeah,
cover.
You're like, oh, well, I was actually supposed to go up. Like, what's happening here? So, like, a little bit more of guidelines would have been helpful, because only from a lot of the research my friend did I know what I was expecting. Like, did I know, you know, these are the masks, there's people in black masks. Like, they don't tell anyone about the black masks. So I actually hadn't thought about that until now, but, like, had I seen someone in the corner, I probably would have freaked out, because I freaked out even knowing they were there.
Right,
because
yeah,
you turn a corner and they're in all black and it's, you know, really dim lighting. So you turn a corner and you see someone and you're like, oh God, I didn't expect someone to be there. So to know that there are those people would also be scary, and like, oh, can you interact with them? Are you supposed to talk to them? Do they do anything? I was convinced the whole time that, like, maybe the Black Mask actually had a secret storyline that I could follow.
Yeah.
I was still kind of like, maybe, but nothing ever came of that, so.
That's what I was kind of wondering earlier, is like, do the actors ever put on the white masks?
That's actually a good question, because we think there may have been an instance where that happened. My friend followed an actor into a room, and they closed the door, and she said that it was locked, and she knocked on it to see if they would open it, and nothing happened. So she waited for a little bit, and the door opened, and out popped a person with a white mask on, and they just walked away. And she said they walked with such confidence and assurity that she thought maybe it was an actor that put on a white mask. And I think that makes sense, to get from place to place without being noticed. Like, that seemed like that could be a thing. And so she was like, oh, should I follow them? Or like, but if it is an actual person in a white mask, like, I can't just follow a person. Like, they'd be so creeped out, you know? So, it's just, like, there's no real rules, which on the one hand, I can understand why, but for someone like me, I think I would have liked a little bit more, just because I think that would have really helped the storyline. But that's my main critique, and I don't know if I could find anything else. And I still would not change anything. Like, I loved it so much.